So now that we're returning errors from our server, let's go ahead and take a look at the client side of this. And in our client app, what we can use is Axios to intercept any errors that come back from our server. Now, as far as Axios is concerned, a 200 response is not an error, whereas anything in the 400 or 500 range of status code responses is an error. And what we can do inside our agent.ts file is we can add an interceptor, and we can intercept either the request or the response coming back from the server. And in this case, because we want to handle the errors we get back from the server, we'll add a response interceptor. So what we can do is we can say axios.interceptors.response.use, and this takes two parameters. The first one is what to do when the response is fulfilled, and we're not going to do anything with that. We just want to handle the errors here. So we'll say undefined for the first parameter, but then we're going to deal with the onRejected part of this. So what we'll do is we'll handle the error situation here, and inside here what we'll do just for now is we'll just simply log the error just to see what we get back from Axios in the event that there's an error. So let's head over to our browser, and I'm just going to open up the terminal window, and we've got a couple of dodgy events now that have no details inside them, and we'll clean up our database after this particular section because we are going to be adding bad data by nature of our testing here. And I've still got the console.log from the activity store. We'll also remove that shortly as well. But first of all, let's go to an activity. So let's just change this particular URL to something that won't exist. So I'll just change this to a 0. And what we get, and we need to deal with this permanent loading indicator as well, of course, if we don't have an activity. But what we get is the request failed with status code 404. That's not particularly useful, and Axios does give us a better response that we can use. And if we take a look at the error response and just repeat this request, then what we get back from Axios is an error object. And if we take a look at this particular object, then what we get inside here is the errors are populated inside this data object, and then we get our activity not found coming back from the server. So what we want to do with errors like this, and we'll pick on the 404 not found, is we would want to redirect the user to a not found page to let them know that what they're looking for doesn't exist. So what we'll do is we'll create a new component called not found, and we'll redirect the user to a not found page in this case. And that's what we'll start with, just dealing with the not found requests. So let's go into Explorer, and inside our layout folder, let's create a new component called not found, so we have something to redirect the users onto. So I'm going to create a new component called notfound.tsx, and inside here this is just going to be a standard React component. So I do have a snippet for the entirety of this so that we can focus on the errors rather than the JSX. So in the snippets is s_10.9.1, and what this is just a normal React component using semantic UI for the styling, and we're using a link from React's router DOM. And all that's inside here is a segment that has a header and an icon, and then just some content to return us to the activities page, or a button I should say, to allow the user to return to the activities page in this case. So what we need to do is add a route for our not found component. So let's go to our app.tsx. And what we want to do for routes that are not found is we want to add an additional route at the end of our routes list here. And all we do is we don't give this a path, we just give it a component, and we just say not found. And in the events that a route cannot be found, we'll be redirected to this particular page. So if I go ahead and try and access a page that doesn't exist, and we'll need to deal with what we're doing here shortly, but if I just try and click on Activi, for instance, then what we get is our not found component, and we can click on a link to return to the activities page and we get taken back to our activities. Now there is a slight problem with our not found component, because if I scroll down this list, then what I should see is we're also displaying our not found component in addition to our activities here. And if we go back and take a look at our routes list, we can't specify that this is exact because we're not using a path on our not found component. And this is always going to be displayed in addition to anything else at the moment. So what we also need to do, and this is something that React Router provides, is we also need to make sure that each of these routes is exclusive. And we can never load more than one of these routes up at the same time. And there's a component we can bring in from React Router called switch, which allows us to do just that. So I'm going to bring in switch from React Router, and if I cut and paste my routes inside this switch, this will ensure that only ever one route is loaded inside what we're wrapping inside this switch component. So if we go back and take a look, we should find that we no longer see our not found component there. And if I just try and repeat the behavior I did before and click on to return to the activities page, we should find that our not found component is gone. So great, now we have a not found component. How do we actually redirect our user to this particular page? When they click on an activity and for whatever reason they decide to change the URL, which forces our API to return the 404 not found. And we'll need to have a think about this because we need to use a redirection. And what we'll do is we'll take a look at how we handle that next.